Welcome to Science Bug. I'm Adela Franson, your host, and today we're going to be talking about prions. Now, I first got into prions because in general chemistry too, me and my lab partner were trying to figure out what we were going to do our presentation on. And we thought about a bunch of different things. We thought about gravity and light but that was a little bit too physics oriented rather than chemistry, although it kind of does tie in. But we also were thinking about, one of her friends had something about adhesives and sea turtles. I don't really remember what that was, but we did end up on prions because we both were really interested. What prions are little small proteins. They can either misfold and become a problem, or they can act normally and the body can use them in a bunch of different ways. Mitochondria use them to defend against viruses because they're smaller than viruses, which is interesting. And the bones, they actually, if you take the prions out of bone marrow, the bones are no longer able to make red blood cells. So you can tell that they're really important. They also have to do with nerves having myelin sheaths, which has to do with nerves talking to each other. If they don't have myelin sheaths in certain nerves, they can't talk to each other very well at all. What happens when they misfold is they can become a disease, which is mad cow disease. It's called CJD in humans, but you know, mad cow is mad cow, whether it's in sheep or humans or cows or, you know, whatever. And what happens is they actually form amyloid plaques. Now, there's something in Alzheimer's that's really similar. They also form amyloid plaques in that, but it's a different kind of protein. It's not a prion protein. With mad cow, it can be actually infectious because the prions that misfold actually bump into other proteins and make them misfold, and it just starts a whole chain reaction where everything gets clumped up and unusable. So it's pretty interesting too, because a lot of times they really can't tell, they can't actually diagnose anything if you're not dead, because they do the tests on brain matter. But of course, if you're alive, you don't want anyone taking your brain matter to test it. It's kind of not the most exciting thing to do on a Saturday evening. So they have to wait until you're dead to do the test, so they can't tell whether you actually have Alzheimer's or mad cow until then. Now, they're actually doing some tests now where they can shine a light into a cow's eye and measure how much it reflects the light back and how it kind of changes whether or not a cow has mad cow disease or not. And that's really interesting because during fetal development of pretty much all mammals, probably other things too, the eyes were actually part of the brain. They were actually part of the brain during fetal development, and obviously they're connected to it, but they're not actually brain matter anymore. So there's also another thing that is, they didn't think they could make the vaccines for mad cow disease because there's actually no immune response towards the prions. The prions do show up more in some of our immune organs. They're called lymph nodes or lymph tissues. They're in your neck and in your armpits and a few other places like your intestines. And they get swollen when you get sick, not because of prions, but because they're defending and eating up bacteria and things like that. But with mad cow, they actually do have a lot of prions in there, but they don't actually do anything with them. At least not that we can tell. So they didn't think they could make a vaccine for it. But lo and behold, we obviously don't know that much about prions yet, because they did make a vaccine for it with mice. They did a study where they introduced prions to some mice, and after 400 days they hadn't developed any symptoms that the other group had. So some pretty interesting developments in prion research and all that type of thing. So Well, thank you for joining us. Next time we'll be talking about glial cells, which are pretty interesting too because they outnumber neurons in your brain. Alright, see you next time.